Are you burnout on being in video conferencing meetings too much or just being on video too much? Well, I hear ya. In the past 16 months or so, we've done so many video conferencing calls, and there's tons of studies coming out showing how fatiguing it is and how draining video conferencing calls can be. Don't get me wrong, I think video conferencing calls have a place and they are more intimate than a phone call. And so there's benefits to doing them, but we need to do them strategically well. And we also need to know when to not do a video conferencing call, because not every single meeting needs to be on a video conferencing or video on. So in this video, we're gonna be talking about how to avoid burnout with doing video calls and video conferencing. And if you like this types of subjects, if you wanna learn how to create technology barriers and digital minimalism, working remotely, I put out 3 new videos every week. So subscribe to my YouTube channel to get more valuable content, as I've worked in technology for 15 plus years and worked as a remote worker for over 5 years. So click below to subscribe now, and let's jump right into the content. So in this video, we're gonna be talking about how to avoid video burnout when it comes to video conferencing and being on video calls too much. The first thing I would mention is when you're in a video conferencing call, what I do is I check out my camera, make sure my hair is okay and my positioning's great, but then I actually hide my self view. So I'm not seeing my video feed while I'm in the meeting. Microsoft Teams doesn't really have a way to do this yet. I'm sure they'll come out with a feature, but Zoom has an easy way in Zoom to hide your view, and it's this hide self view in the features. This gives you the ability not to see yourself while you're on camera, because let's be honest, I've never been in a meeting where I have a mirror, an in-person meeting where I have a mirror of my video feed right there on my picture of myself while I'm in the meeting. It's so distracting. It's very, it causes us to have our defenses up and to be insecure because we constantly are looking at ourselves. Very unnatural, very unhealthy. So what I do is in the beginning of the call, I make sure I look okay, make sure I'm centered okay, make sure my camera looks good, my hair, whatever. And then I hide my self view for the whole meeting. That way I can just focus on looking at them, their video feed, and make it as natural as possible. So that's the biggest thing I do to avoid burnout. The next thing I do is I prioritize video calls. The next tip is prioritize when to prioritize video calls. So not every call should be with the video on. How I prioritize it currently right now is that for meetings with clients, I generally have the video on. Especially if you work in a relationship-based industry where you're trying to build a relationship with people and build trust, having that video on makes it more intimate and makes you create that connection. It's very vulnerable. You have to be professional. You have to present yourself well, and which makes it challenging, right? Which create burnout. But the benefits, especially if you're in marketing or sales or any sort of relationship building, customer service, are great. So having the video on with customers is super important. With team members, I'm probably 50-50, where I wanna have video on with team members, especially group meetings, I'll have it on. One-on-ones, I'll have it on with my boss. But not every meeting with my team members should I have the video on. So I found that not everyone is necessary, especially if you're talking to your team members all the time, right? You do want to have it occasionally. That way you kind of build that rapport and you can see their face and the nuances and the intimacy that video conferencing creates. That being said, not every single one. And then vendors or people that I'm buying products from or third parties, a lot of times I keep my video off. And those types of relationships are very transactional a lot of the times. And so having that is just taxing. So that's the second tip is prioritize when to do video, because not every meeting justifies having video on. And because historically before the pandemic, when we met with people in person, we would meet with people in person. Here's a great way to think about it. If you were to go prioritize meeting them in person, have the video on. If it's something that you were just gonna take a phone call for, like a vendor or a third party that you're buying something from, have your video off, right? Before the pandemic, you never would have go met them in person, right? You wouldn't go have lunch with them or go meet them at their office and shake their hand and have that intimate. So a great framework to think about it is if before the pandemic, if you were to meet them in person, then that justifies having video on. If you were not meeting them in person, if you're just gonna call them, then continue that cadence of just calling them. Hope that's helpful. Number 3 is call people more, right? This is kind of falls into this number 2, but call people more. This will just help you get out of the habit of doing video conferencing and setting up Zoom, is call people more. This will help you ultimately just have less video conferencing calls, and then also help you just, phone calls are great. I think they're awesome. I think phone calls died during the pandemic for some reason. We went all to video conferencing. But phone calls are great. You're able to just really focus on what you're saying, focus on listening to them versus being distracted. It's the reason why we love podcasts. Listening to hear people talk is awesome. The words that you say are the most important things. How you look and your nonverbal communication is great, but the words that you say are even that much more important. And phone calls, you can get a lot done in phone calls. And then last but not least, the 4th thing I would recommend is ask people. Do you want the video on or off? Do you prefer having it on or off? I think the vast majority of people want it off, unless you have to. And so what I recommend is asking people. You know, I use a scheduling tool like Calendly or HubSpot's calendar scheduling tool where people can book time on my calendar. Microsoft Meetings is another one that integrates with Microsoft 365, where people can book time on your calendar. Ask them a question there. Do you want the video on or off? That's another tool I've used to just get people's feedback of like, hey, you know what? They don't want it on, I'll leave it off. So these 4 things. First, number 1, hide your self view, right? Don't look at yourself while you're in a video conferencing. That will reduce. Number 2, learn to prioritize video calls. Number 3, make sure you push towards phone calls, right? Call people more versus setting up a Zoom link or a virtual meeting. And then number 4, ask people if they want video on or off. This will help you get feedback from your clients or vendors, whoever it is, if they prefer it on or off. And I guarantee people are gonna respond no a lot of the times because people are burnt out on video conferencing. So hope this was helpful on how to avoid video burnout and just being in front of the camera or being on video conferencing so much. If you enjoyed this, please like the video, comment below of other strategies you've used to help eliminate video conferencing calls or just help them do them better without having to be so taxing. We also, if you like this content, subscribe to my channel. I put out 3 new videos every week on working remotely, how to create boundaries with technology, and not only how to leverage technology well while working remotely or in this remote first world, but then also how to create boundaries with it. So that way we reduce burnout and reduce stress and all that good stuff. So look forward to seeing you in the next video. Make sure you subscribe and take care.